Good morning and welcome to today's NENS webinar, which is entitled How I Would Hack You, Confessions of an Ethical Hacker. My name is Ted Hulsey and I'm your host for today's event. First, let's go through a few housekeeping items. All participants are in listen-only mode. Today's session will be recorded and circulated to all registrants. Thank you for joining in for the live session. Your questions are strongly encouraged throughout the presentation. I'll be monitoring the Q&A log in real time, and we'll be sure to ask our speakers your questions as we go along. Please make sure you use the Q&A tool and use the chat function for comments only. We are also sending you a 1-minute survey at the conclusion of the event. We look forward to your input and feedback on the conversation. Now let's look at the agenda. After brief introductions, James Carroll, our featured guest speaker, will share the 5 most common security vulnerabilities faced by growing businesses today. James is hired by his clients to probe and compromise their networks. He's going to share what he has learned from years of hacking into companies just like your own. Next, we hear from the team at NENS on how they help their clients protect and defend their organizations through cybersecurity best practices and comprehensive managed security services. And then we will conclude with a formal Q&A section. Now let me introduce our speakers. James Carroll is founder and principal at Secure Network Technologies. He is a professionally trained ethical hacker and penetration tester. When not hacking into his clients' networks, James is a frequent speaker and trainer at cybersecurity industry events. He also speaks frequently at industry events with non-technical senior management and leaders. And next up is Michael Kirkalakis. Michael is a principal at New England Network Solutions. He has been an IT professional for 20 years. As an engineer, Michael focused on enterprise networking and security, and today he spends much of his time guiding businesses on IT strategy and security. James and Michael, welcome you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna get right into it, and I'm gonna hand controls over to James. So, James, get ready to take it away.
Oh, I'm ready. All right, let's see. That work?
Yep, I can see your slides just fine.
Getting real good at this technology thing, Ted. Real good. All right. So we got a good one for you, and Ted, I tell you this all the time, but this is my favorite presentation. Basically, when I was putting this together, and really when I was developing this about a year or two back, I'm like, how can I show an audience every possible way I could hack them in under an hour, right? And really that was the brainchild of it, or the byproduct of that is this presentation. So I'm going to jump right in because we got a lot of good information. There's a lot of neat things you're going to learn, like, wow, I never knew an attacker is going to look for that, or I never knew an attacker could use social media to try and reset a password. And these are all tried and true stories. Right? This isn't stuff like, there's no theoretical things. This is all like, hey, the reason I'm telling you this is because more often than not, this is how I'm going to hack a network, and these are the things I'm going after. So we'll jump right in. Little introduction about myself. My name is James Carroll. I'm an engineer. On the right there, that's my golden doodle, Duke. He just turned 2. He's about 2.5 now. That was him right at the beginning of COVID. Put the mask on him, the stethoscope on him. He was Dr. Duke for the day. How I started hacking, and what you're going to see throughout this presentation is a lot of the questions I'll answer before you ask them, because I get asked them all the time. So one comment I always get is like, James, how'd you get into what you're doing? The story is actually kind of funny. So when I was 15, 16 years old, the biggest video game out at the time was one that's called Halo 2, right? It was a first-person shooter. It was also one of the first games I was playing online. So you connect your Xbox to the internet, you play from people all over the world. And what I'd want to do, and me and my friends would always have this competition of who could win the most games. And the more games you win, the higher your skill level is, right? So they rank you 1 to 50 in skill level. What I figured out is a way where when I'm in a game, I can actually just for comparison purposes, I turn off the other people's internet, right? So I'm in a game, it's me versus 7 people. I can actually turn off their internet by just flooding it with a denial of service attack. When their internet's off, they can't connect to the game, I automatically win, right? So I started doing that for a while. Reason I stopped doing that is because what I learned is that if you're, if someone's at like an Air Force base playing or on a college campus and you try to turn off their internet, things can get a little dicey. Residential networks, fine. When you start talking about someone that's in the Naval Academy and you start hitting them, you start getting nasty grams from your ISP. So that's how I got into it. And it was just crazy to me. I'm like, dude, I'm a 16-year-old kid. I went on a YouTube and I found a video. This is the actual video I found. It's like how to turn off anyone's internet. And I'm like, all right. And I started watching it. And within 15 minutes, I was able to do it. And the programs I used back then, some things are still relevant. Cain and Abel, right? That's an old school hacking program from way back in the day. Then Zone Alarm Pro. And these are my tools of the trade. My first 2 hacking programs I ever got my hands on. I still remember my dad screaming at me because sometimes I turned off my own internet on accident. Like, I'm in a meeting. Why are you turning off the internet? I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to turn off this kid from Florida's internet. So it was good times. A lot of fun was had. My dad was an engineer. Both my parents were engineers. They worked at Lockheed Martin. And I always tell people, like, yeah, they were really good at fixing stuff. So I had to be really good at breaking stuff. That's really that's my background more or less. All right, so presentation format. First thing I always like to go over is current events. So what's new in the hacking world? What are we seeing when we're doing incident response and breach response? And really, what are the hackers? What are they up to? What are the bad guys up to? The 2 types of hacks we'll go over, how the hacks occur, and then what I call the anatomy of a hack, or the 4 phases of Poonage, which is basically start to finish how a hacker's gonna own your network, own your life, steal all your data. Open source intelligence gathering, I refer to this as OSINT throughout the presentation. So if you hear me say OSINT, this is what I'm referring to. How we gain network access. Then once we gain network access, right, how we gain user access. Once we do that, how we gain admin access. And really what we're after when we're talking about a network is we want domain admin access. We want DA or DOM admin access. That's the goal. Once we get that, it's over. And then where does the data go, right? So once a hacker hacks you, they get admin access, they own your whole network. What are they doing with the data? And a lot of people don't know that, you can literally use a web browser and get to some of this data on the internet. It's kind of crazy. All right, so current events in Nerdland. So these are big right now, the COVID-19 phishing scams or phishing emails. A lot of products, like if you're using like a Mimecast or a spam filter, they'll show you something like this, like a big red danger message of like, hey, don't look at this. It doesn't look that safe. You would be shocked when I do phishing engagements. I'll fish people. They'll have like Mimecast or something, and it shows them this big red message. I'm like, yeah, it's great and everything, but I still want to click on the link. It boggles my mind at the amount of warnings and things people will click through to get, a free Arby's, roast beef sandwich. It's insane. So this one says, dear staff, here's a notification. Click on this link for the new COVID-19, required directive. You click on it and it downloads malware. So moral of the story here, right, is trust the warning signs, right? If you see a big red warning sign like this, it's probably for a good reason. The other thing is, admin department is the title. Admin department is how's the email signed. There's usually, very few cases where someone's going to sign an email as admin department. So a couple telltale signs there. This was a pretty popular one, and these are pretty big where, you get an email from MIT and it has the latest coronavirus PDF attached. If you really want it, you Google MIT coronavirus report, or I think John Hopkins has the one. I don't think MIT is going to randomly be emailing you a PDF of coronavirus information. So just be wary with this stuff. We're seeing a lot of these types of attacks now. So if you get something like this, just be extra cautious. The new one that we've seen is there's actually a COVID-19 based malware. And it actually, what happens is it's ransomware. We're like, hey, if you don't pay us, $150 within the next 2 days, they don't actually steal your data. They just rewrite your whole computer. Like they'll rewrite your master boot record. So your thing is just like, it's a sparkly clean computer, right out of the dishwasher. So avoid these ones at all costs. Okay, so the types of hacks, I kind of classify these as 2 different types. I got the people hacks and the computer hacks, and they're pretty different by nature. But the consequences are pretty similar. They're both very, very deadly. So how do people get hacked? Really, it's one of these things right here. And these are called social engineering, right? It's manipulation. And social engineering, if you guys don't know, Ted, I don't know if I told you this story, but I actually started social engineering not long after I started hacking people in Halo. And what I would do is I'd be 17, 18 years old. I grew up in Utica, New York. Not a whole lot to do in Utica, New York. So what you want to do is, like any 17, 18-year-old, you want to buy alcohol. The issue is we were 17, 18 years old. So what I would do is I'd find a gas station really close to a construction site. I'd put on Timberland boots, jeans, a construction vest, and I'd walk in the gas station. I'd look like the construction worker, and I'd, you know, buy, I don't know, Natty Ice or Steel Reserve, wherever the cheapest thing was at the time. And, you know, I'd put on the counter, they asked for my ID. I'm like, listen, man, I work at the construction site down the street. I lost my wallet a million times. You know, can you just, you know, I got $20. You can keep the change. Does that work? And most of the time that would work, believe it or not. What we learned though is, you know, you want to choose like the Valeros, the Red Apples. Don't choose like the big chain gas station, like the Sunocos. If there's like there's an Indian reservation with a lot of casinos by me, and like don't even give those a rip, because it's bad news happens there. So don't say you didn't learn anything in this presentation, right? And then you have the most overplayed sense in information security. People are your weakest link. I hate hearing it because I hear it so much, but it's true. People are your weakest link. And computers, for the most part, are pretty binary, right? It's a 1 or a 0. Humans have something computers don't have. Humans have emotions, right? You can turn a no into a yes. Just last week, there was a guy, he was walking into a building. I was behind him. You had to scan your card to get in, and my job was to break into the building. He scanned his card, looked back at me, looked at my card, and he goes, "I don't recognize you." I'm like, "Oh no, I'm here with Bill, the IT guy." He's like, "Okay, yeah, you're good," and just let me right in. So you can turn a lot of no's into yeses by just playing a story or just making something up. So when I talk about breaking into buildings, a lot of people are like, "Well, do you actually do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, we do." And this is a video of really how easy it is. If you look in the top right here, you're going to see a guy. He's going to open this door on the right. He's going to scan his card to open this door in the front. And when he does it, he does what he's kind of supposed to do, right? He'll open this door. He scans his badge, looks back at my colleague Eric, says he looks legit. And then he actually, you can't see, but he's looking down at the badges on our waist. Looks back at me, goes, he looks legit. And then he lets you in. And probably 99 times out of 100, if, you know, we're hired to get into a building, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to tailgate. This is called tailgating, right? You just tailgate someone in the door. What he's supposed to do and what protocol is, you know, if you don't recognize someone, say, "Hey, I don't recognize you. Who are you with? What department are you? You know, what department do you work in? You know, who's your manager? I just want to make sure that you're supposed to be here because I've never seen you in this building before." So clearly he did not do that. So another interesting thing about this one was we had a box. If you remember, in my hands, there was a big box. So what was in that box were a bunch of flash drives. We had 350 flash drives in that box. And what we were doing was we were pretending to be IT. And we're walking around this facility saying, "Hey, you know, we're IT. If you need to transfer any files, this is the only secure way to do it. Don't put it in your email. Don't put it in the FTP server. Throw these files on these flash drives and you'll be good to go." And what they did is they'd throw this flash drive in their computer and infect their computer and then allow us to hack those computers. And we put these things everywhere, man. I mean, we put them, I remember walking in the elevator, throwing them in offices. We're putting them in fish bowls, putting them in cafeterias. This guy on the right here, this was hilarious because this was a manufacturing plant, and there was a part of that plant we couldn't get to because, believe it or not, we didn't have safety glasses. So we were in the break room. We saw a guy with safety glasses. I'm like, "Dude, this guy probably works in the manufacturing area." So I handed him 2 fish bowls, probably 100 of these flash drives. I'm like, "Hey, you know, I don't have safety glasses. Can you just hand these out to people on the floor?" He's like, "Sure." And, you know, I'm checking the logs and he's plugging them into everything, man. He's plugging in the brake presses. He's like robotic welder machines, like literally anything with a USB port, this guy was plugging these things into. Then I see hits from like residential areas. So people bringing them home, plugging them in their home computers, giving them to family members, like literally everywhere. The worst part of the story was this was about 2 months after that. These flash drives are branded with their logo, right? So we put the company logo on them so they look legit. And about 2 months after the engagement, I started getting some hits on the logs from people plugging these in Las Vegas. I'm like, Las Vegas, how did they get from New York to Las Vegas? So I called the guy there, the IT guy. I'm like, "Hey, I just want to let you know, like, I'm getting hits from Vegas on these flash drives." He's like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on." He calls me 15 minutes later. He goes, "Oh my God, marketing took a bunch of those flash drives and they brought them to a trade show booth and they're handing them out to clients at the trade, like a swag, right? Oh, here's a branded flash drive." So we're getting hits like hotels, the Bellagio, people are flying home, like all over really all over the country. I'm getting hits from these things. I'm like, dude, that's not good. Luckily, there was we had some technology built in with a little kill switch in there, so we were pretty safe. But moral of the story, right? If you get a flash drive, and they crank those things like Doritos now. You know, let's say it's got your favorite Disney character on it. just bring it to IT, wipe it, bring it to someone, say, hey, can you clean this flash drive before I plug it in? Because I mean, we don't dream this stuff up. This stuff actually happens. That's why people hire us to do stuff like this. People put, malicious flash drives outside of big office parks and big cities, hotel rooms, lobby areas, things like that. So this stuff actually happens, and as you can see, it's pretty successful. All right, switching gears a little bit, the anatomy of a hack. So I'm going to go over kind of the phases that we do when we're hacking you guys. So phase 1, open source intelligence gathering. Phase 2, gaining network access. Like I said before, once you gain network access, you want regular user access, right? What can a user see? What can a user do? Go from user to admin, and then admin to domain admin. And once you get that, you're good to go. I mean, it's game over at that point. So I'm going to tell you how we do that. For anyone that nerds out on this stuff like me, these are some of my favorite tools that I use. Metasploit, that's a pretty well-known one. It's an exploit framework to exploit known vulnerabilities. Burp Suite, this is how we test like websites and web applications. It's able to scan stuff, look for SQL injections, and all sorts of other fun stuff. This tool right here is probably the one I use the most. It's free. You can go to GitHub and download it. It's literally like a 200 line Python script, and what it does is it just relays communication on the inside of a network. A lot of times I'll start this up in a network, and within 15 minutes I'm admin. It's like, I don't even like using it because it takes the fun out of the job. It's like cheating. Empire is another really good tool. This was developed to bypass traditional antivirus, right? So if you have a signature-based antivirus, not heuristic or behavior-based, a lot of times this tool will get around it. It creates FUD or fully undetectable malware. So if there's no signature for it and I create a new piece of malware, I can install on a machine and the AV will literally not do a single thing. Then Silent Trinity is a new one as well. It's just like Empire, but it actually uses .NET framework, which is pretty neat, and it can bypass. I've had this bypass next gen AVs that are misconfigured. So this one's really, really dangerous. All right, so OSINT or open source intelligence, what is it? There's a lot of definitions. Basically, it's cyber stalking, more or less. So I used to watch this Netflix series called, I think it was called You, and it had this guy, and he would have girlfriends, and he would stalk them and look up everything about them and where they lived, their phone, everything, and then he would know where they're going to be at all times. That's essentially OSINT, right? It's literally cyber stalking, figuring out a person's habits, what they're interested in, where they went to school, who recommends them on LinkedIn, who their friends are, what their friends like to do, where their friends meet up with them. The more information a hacker knows about someone, the better, because then they can craft a good phishing email. They can figure out where they're going to be, if they're going to be in the office, if they're going to be home, what time they come in, if they can follow them in. Just tons and tons of data for open source intelligence. The number one tool we use for OSINT is social media. Social media is by far the best tool. The weird thing about social media is people are like, well, there's Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's only a couple sites. Dude, you're 100% wrong. There's over 1,000+ social networking sites. There's over 152 million blog sites, right? I mean, I like to think I'm pretty young and hip. I'm 29, I'm gonna be 30 this year, don't remind me, but I'll be doing open source intelligence and I'll see TikTok and VSCO and all this other crazy sites. I'm like, dude, I've never heard of these sites in my life. But dude, there's tons and tons of sites. Blog sites are big as well, right? Because if I find out, someone's interested in something, I can go on a blog site, figure out their username, look that username up, tie it back to other sites they're on, figure out what they're posting. I mean, it's big. It's big when you're crafting a good email. Someone's interested in mountain biking, I can just be like, hey, this is pinkbike.com and your passwords, your account's been compromised. Click this link to reset your password, and I mean, you're in. So really, really dangerous. How can this hurt you? There's a certain clientele in an industry that they use password reset prompts. So a lot of clients use, if you get your password, you gotta call IT. There's a certain vertical that uses actually reset prompts. So what happens is if you get your password, you can go on a website passwordreset.acme.com, and you enter in your username, and it asks you 3 questions, and you only have to answer 2 of them right. So if I can answer 2 of these 3 questions, I can reset anyone's password. So when we find this, normally what I do is I go on Facebook, LinkedIn, look up who works at the company. And I'm not saying that I target 21 to 28-year-old females because I use social media, but I definitely do. Because they love social media, right? They're all over it. They're posting, things on Instagram where they are. They're tagging all their friends. I mean, girls these days, they blow up social media. So I like to find 21 to 28-year-old, preferably a fresh college graduate. And I start searching through everything, their timeline, their Instagram photos, their Snapchat locations, literally everything. And oftentimes you can find the answer to 2 of these 3 questions. So in this specific example, I was doing a bank, and I found Lindsay Wall. She fit in my age range. Like, all right, let's look at her social media profile. Went on her Facebook, found her Facebook pretty easily. And then I started looking through her pictures, right? And literally probably 5 pictures down, I see this bad boy. And it's her with a dog, and the dog's wearing an Alabama jersey. And the caption of the photo is "hanging with my pal Spike, #Roll Tide." Now, if we remember what the questions were to reset our password, it was, what's the name of your favorite pet? What's your favorite superhero? What's your favorite sports team? I only have to answer 2 of 3. So in one single picture, I got the answer to 2 of the questions, right? What's the name of your favorite pet? I'm going to guess that's going to be Spike. What's the name of your favorite sports team? I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, if you're dressing your dog up in an Alabama jersey, it's probably going to be Alabama. So I put in Spike, put in Alabama, and then it says your password is SpikeRocks19. So using social media, 25, maybe 30 minutes of my time, I'm able to reset, or actually in this case, get someone's password. So what are lessons that we learned here? Lesson number 1 is do not put your entire life on social media, right? Like if you have a solution and you're using password reset prompts like that, don't say, oh, well, my password reset prompt is, what's my favorite sports team? What's the name of my pet? Don't broadcast that stuff, right? Or use a different, in this case, I recommended, hey, you probably should move away from using a password reset prompt like that. Don't use easily guessable security phrases or passwords. And then what I always recommend no matter what I'm doing is use 2FA, use two-factor authentication, right? Two-factor authentication, and almost every single breach I've ever responded to would have prevented it. Because let's say I got her password, I guessed it was SpikeRocks19, I go to log in, it's going to prompt her phone, or I need a token or some other value to get in. So in theory, if she had a really bad password, it really wouldn't have mattered because 2FA would have stopped it. Always recommend that on any external facing service that that a client uses.
Hey, James. James, just a quick question. Can you give just kind of a quick elevator pitch? What is 2FA? What is it? How does it work? How easy can it be to use? Just give a...
Yeah, for sure. So it's really, really simple. And if you do banking at like, a Bank of America, or really any bank nowadays, you usually have it. So what happens is you'll go to a service, let's say you go to your webmail, you log in with your username and password. When you log in, it'll text you a code, or it'll generate a code on an application on your phone. You look at that code, usually like a 6-character code, and then you enter it into the webmail portal. So you need 2 things to log in. You need your password, they need that unique code that's generated every time you log in. And that prevents, like, let's say I'm hacking your webmail, I guess your password, I go to log in, and it says, oh, we just texted you a code. Like, unless I have your phone and I unlock your phone, I'm not gonna be able to get in. So it makes life a lot more challenging for a hacker.
And you can put 2FA on a host of different types of applications, a lot of corporate applications, your corporate Office 365, Microsoft 365, et cetera, et cetera. Correct.
Yeah, you can basically put on anything now.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
No problem, no problem. So story number 2 is this one's, every time I present, this one's a fan favorite. This one's called Diaper Man, and this one's not your typical OSINT story. So what happened here is we do a lot of breach response and forensics, and we're doing a breach response to, it was actually I think it was a big school, and we're in there, we're doing investigation. We see all this malware being downloaded from this one computer. So we started investigating it and we find out there's this one computer, this one user is going to all these weird websites, just loaded with malware. And I'm like, all right, well, let's dig into this a little bit more. We found that he had a really strange browsing history. The AV would clean his computer, but then within a day or 2, it just keep getting infected. So something weird's going on here. We also found that there's a bunch of network shares that were completely filled up. Like their whole storage array was filled up with videos and photos, and it was just a common complaint that, like, hey, we're getting infected, and for whatever reason, all our storage is done. We gotta buy more storage. Well, let's take a look. So what we found out is that they had an employee there who suffered from something called paraphilic infantilism. What this is it's basically he was obsessed with regressing to a baby. And what he was doing, he was going on all these online websites like Backpage and Craigslist and finding other people who liked to dress up as babies, and they would get together and have like baby dress up parties, like crazy stuff. And I'm not going to tell you the sites he was on, but you can imagine, right? If you're into that kind of stuff, you're probably on some sketchy sites that have a lot of malware. I'll just say that. But this was the definition from Wikipedia, right? It's a fetish that involves role playing and regression to an infant-like state. Behaviors may include drinking from a bottle, wearing diapers. Trust me, I saw pictures of all of it, and just a lot of crazy stuff. And when we went in, we're on the storage array and we're seeing pictures like adults and babies and playpens and giant high chairs and just the things that your brain will never be able to unsee. So literally I had to write in a report, the reason your network was infected was because Joe Schmo was obsessed with being a baby and it was on all these websites, and it was just nuts. This is a kind of a uncommon one, but it makes a really good story. But the lessons that we learned here, right, is that number one, probably the most important thing you learn today is people are weird. I mean, you probably know that, right? People are weird. They're into weird things. If you have a lot of employees, I can't stress enough to monitor network traffic, monitor websites they're going to, because if they had something in place, a solution in place that said, hey, we're going to block suspicious websites, or if someone's trying to go on, babydates.com, we're going to get alerted to it, you probably could have stopped a lot of this stuff from happening. All right, another example that we have of social media and how we exploit it, and this is actually really, really common, is Facebook reviews. And we had a hospital, it wasn't Cleveland Clinic, but I'll use them as the example, that said, hey, we want you to try and get patient data, or PII or PHI. And we're not going to tell you anything. You just got to go on the internet, use open source intelligence, and try and get data. And we actually learned this from breach response. A hacker actually did this to one of our clients, so we ended up doing it as part of this engagement. So what we do, and what a lot of hackers do, is they'll go on Facebook and look at the Facebook reviews. So if you own a company, or you're part of a company that you have a lot of customers, you do a lot of business to consumer transactions, Facebook reviews are big, because if I go on your Facebook page, I see someone reviewed it, I got a lot of information out, right? I know that in this case, Ken Flass reviewed Cleveland Clinic. He said he's been coming there since February of 2016. He sees Dr. Kaok. It's great. He's from Sharon, Pennsylvania. So just in this one review, he gave us a ton of information about him and really his relationship with Cleveland Clinic. What we then did is I went on Cleveland Clinic's page, found his doctor, Ralph Kauk, and I also found his PA, Katie Cruz. And this is important because when we're going to try and get his data, we're gonna exploit the relationship between the PA and the doctor, and we'll get to that in a second. I then went on a website called Spokio. I think Spokio is free now, but it used to be like $5 a month. It's like White Pages on steroids. So I looked up Ken Flask, found his phone numbers, found where he lived, found his address history, found his relatives. I could find everything about this guy. So now I knew when he was coming from Cleveland Clinic, I knew who he was seeing, I know where he lives, I know his phone numbers, I know his address history, I know his relatives, I know everything about this guy, except his social, pretty much. So at this point, I forged an email. So I pretended to be Dr. Kaok and I emailed Katie Cruz. And what I did is I used the domain of Cleveland-Clinic, not email, not clevelandclinic.com, because obviously I can't buy that because it's owned. I emailed Katie. I said, hey, I'm out of the office. Ken Flask called. He needs a referral. Can you, fax his medical records to this email, or to this number? She sees the email, says, sure thing, doc, gets right on it. And the next thing you know, she faxes over medical records. And this whole thing, right, this whole attack took maybe 15 minutes. We tested 11 people, 9 of them sent us medical records, and they're all based off Facebook reviews. We just went on Facebook, looked at a review, took that person's name, found the doctor they were using, if they used it in the review, and then exploited that. So if you're a proponent of leaving Facebook reviews, right, just know that when you do it, you're leaving a lot of data out there that hackers can use. If you have a business that has a Facebook page where people can review it, I always recommend turning it off. I think there's a setting where you can turn it on, but they can't put any comments in it. So they can't tell you things like who they saw or leave a lot of information out there. Lessons we learned here, right? Don't put your life on social media. Be careful when you review those services, and educate employees on phishing, right? So if Katie Cruz was a little more astute to social engineering and threat vectors, maybe it could have been a different outcome. All right, one thing I always touch on, and this is a huge way we hack people, is bad passwords, right? Bad passwords are huge. And the biggest issue I see with this is that Microsoft tells you that your password's good, right? A lot, probably 95% of businesses I go to have this password policy, right? It's a minimum password length of 8 characters, and complexity is set. So what this means is that you can't have a password lower than 8 characters, and you have to have your password contain two of three things. It has to contain either a special character, an uppercase letter, or a number. 2 of the 3. So people go, well, I always go, man, I'm like, you need a 12-character password policy. I go, well, we're compliant, so we're secure. I'm like, okay, let me know how that goes in a year when you guys get breached. Because with this password policy, right, and like I said, 95% of companies use it, you can use password 1 with a capital P. In Microsoft's eyes, that's a strong password. I'm gonna tell you right now, if you have that password, you will get breached. Spring 20 with a capital S, winter 20, fall 2020, temp 1, 2, 3, 4. If I'm doing an assessment, I'd probably say 50% of the time someone's using one of these passwords. Or it's not password 1, it's password 2, right? And they change it, password 3, password 4. I figure out how long they've been working there, how many times I got to change it. Then you can figure out what that number is going to be. So you need to stop doing that. This is a huge way companies get breached. Another way is password reuse, right? So people use good passwords, right? Like, hey, I got this really good password, I remember it, but they use it for literally everything. So using it for Facebook, their bank, other social media profiles, as well as their webmail or their VPN. So what you can do is you can actually go to a website. It's called WeLeakInfo.to. It's on the internet. Anyone can go there. I think it costs $30 a month in Bitcoin you got to pay, but you can look up anyone's password. So I just looked up this domain, mkb.ru, and you can see there's a lot of people's passwords on there. So if you have a company, right, all a hacker has to do is go in here, type your domain, right, like, it's at securenetworking.com. And if you had a password that was used for a website that was breached in the past, what these guys do is they buy those password dumps and they sell them like this in this portal. So the biggest breach that they have is the LinkedIn breach in 2012. So every password that, if you had a LinkedIn account in 2012, your password's in here. Twitter in 2014, if you had Twitter in 2014, your password's on here. There is a huge one for a forum called Vertical Scope. If you had a password or you're a part of a forum in 2018, it's on here. So this is huge, and I can't stress enough using unique passwords for everything because of this, right? You do not want to reuse a password for multiple services. So where do we use this? VPN portals are big, right? If I find a password, I'll try to log into your VPN, get access to you there. Webmail is big as well. Cloud services, Dropbox, Box, Salesforce. What we'll find is that people protect and they use 2-factor on VPN and OWA, but they won't use it for like Salesforce and other cloud services. So if I find a password, I'm going to try everything. There's actually a script I have where it literally tries like 67 sites with a username and password and tells me where I can log in. So that's good stuff. RDP is huge as well. So if you have RDP punched through your firewall, hackers love, and I mean love, to try to guess the password there. Because if you get in, right, you pretty much have a nice Windows interface. You can access files. I mean, it's a home run for a hacker. So how do we hack this? I use a tool called Hydra. It's pretty easy to use. And basically, I just load a list of usernames, load a list of passwords, and I got some. It's literally just automated password guessing. And you can see here, right, it turns green when you get one. So this is just an example, but I could load tens of thousands of passwords in there, let it run all day, and it'll ping me when I got a legit one. All I need is one, right? That's all I need is one valid password. So this is a good tool to use. One thing I always recommend is passphrase instead of passwords, right? So if your old password was like Blue House 1, we recommend using a passphrase like I live in a blue house on Maple Street 1. What I think it's just as easy to remember, right? Just a phrase, but a lot harder to break or a lot harder to guess. 2-factor authentication, again, right? It's a common theme in this presentation. Use it, implement it, it's great. And then use unique passwords for each service. All right, so now that we have user access, we guessed the password, we have user access, how are we going to get admin access? The first way is abusing privileges. And the biggest issue we see here is that domain users oftentimes have admin access to a machine. And the use case for this is pretty simple, right? You have Lisa Smith here. Lisa works in accounting. She needs access to QuickBooks and she uses the password of password 20. So she's not an admin. She goes to open it, says you need to be an admin to run this program. She submits an IT ticket. IT says, well, we can solve this pretty simply. We'll just make Lisa an admin. They make her an admin on the PC. Now Lisa's super happy, right? She can run QuickBooks, But since she's an admin on the PC, she can install literally anything, right? Sims 4, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I mean, you name it, and Lisa can install it. The most dangerous thing she can install, obviously, is malware, right? She can run anything as an admin, including malware. So if she's on a website, she downloads a bad file, that piece of malware is going to run as admin, and then it can then pivot across the domain or across the network using like shared local admin accounts and all sorts of other fun things. So when I'm doing an assessment, one of the first things I look for when I get passwords is this user an admin anywhere? If they are, I can almost guarantee you I'll get domain admin one way or another, unless that network is really, really hardened. So you want to avoid that. So recapping how we'll get admin, right? We use Hydra, we guess a password, we log in through RDP, we find Julie Smith with password 20. When you're admin on a machine, you can run malware. One of the best pieces of malware we can run is one called Mimikat. It's a weird name, I know, but it's actually really, really dangerous. So what this tool will do is it'll actually pull plain text passwords out of the computer's memory. So this is an example from my lab. You can see I just logged in, she's admin, ran the tool, and the username is SQL analysis service, a service account, and the password is this is an OK password 99 exclamation point. The crazy part about this tool is that it doesn't matter if you have an 8-character password or an 800-character password. If you don't have the settings right on your registry, this tool will run and it will grab that password and it will do it in plain text. You don't got to crack anything. It's a beautiful thing. And then once you get this is a domain admin account. I mean, you're pretty much it's over, right? You can do anything you want. You own the entire network at that point. So that's what we want to do, and that's what hackers want to do. Because once you get that, I mean, you are the admin, right? It's like it's like that pirate movie. I'm the captain now. You're the admin now. Another thing we see sometimes is misconfigurations and bad patching. This is a little more uncommon than things we already went over, but it does happen. One of the biggest ones I've seen in the past 2 years is the FORTINET exploit. I think it was CVE 2018-13-37-9. So what this was is it was a FORTINET vulnerability, and it literally allows anyone with a web browser to get VPN passwords. It's kind of crazy. The weird part to me is that you didn't really see it on the news. It didn't make a whole lot of a big media splash, but I mean it's crazy easy to exploit. And here's one beautiful thing about the InfoSec world is if you want to learn how to do something, there's someone online who will tell you how to do it. So I just Googled how to exploit the FORTINET SSL VPN web portal, and this article came up in Russian. Not really a big surprise there. Google Translate will make it English. You read it, and he walks through step by step how to exploit this. So once you know how to exploit it, the next step is, as a hacker, how am I going to find vulnerable targets? Well, that's pretty easy. And what we're going to do here is we'll use Google. And Google is a hacker's best friend. And most people think about Google as like, what's the best restaurant in Syracuse? How hackers can use this is you look up like please log in and then in URL -remote -login. What this means is the FORTINET vulnerable hosts have the words please log in at vpn.com/remote/login. So this will actually bring up all of the vulnerable VPNs. So you can see there's quite a few in here. What you can then do is I just click on one, and all I do is click on it, add this URL right here on the right to /remote/FGT language. It's just you copy and paste it and you're good to go. And it tells you plain text password. So in this case, M. Burgess had the password on Monday, Bo Barnes, Lotus Notes, Leps, Turtle, $. I mean, and this wasn't just one case. We found over 2,000 that were indexed by Google. So you can just go through Google, right? Keep clicking on each one and you keep getting passwords for every single company. It's wild. Very easy to exploit, and you can get admin access really, really easily. So what I did is I found a company, high profile company, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be a good guy for once. And I'm going to email this guy and tell him, hey, I was doing research on a vulnerability. I found out that you guys were suffering from it, and I just thought I'd let you know so you can fix it. And he responds with, I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. At that point, you just got hit with the old good luck. You know what I mean? Like there's just not a whole lot of hope for that. So I don't do free work often, and this is why, right? When I do, it's just I just get pooped on. Just no one appreciates it anymore. Hacking SEO. So this is another great example. Search engine optimization can be hacked, and it's done by cloning websites. So in this case, we cloned a client website. It was acme.webmail.com. We made acme-webmail.com. I then took that website, put in Amazon Web Services, put up the fake webmail portal like they had, And what I do is I normally wait 2 weeks. So hackers do this as well. When they're gonna send you a phishing email, they'll register a website, wait 2 weeks. The reason for that is because a lot of webmails have it's called a newly registered domain rule. So if the domain is less than 2 weeks old, it automatically goes to spam. So I put it online, ready to go. I'm like, all right, I'll wait 2 weeks and then send this phishing email out. After about 3 days, I'm like looking at the log files. I'm getting tons of hits. People are logging into it. I'm like, how do people know about this website? I didn't tell anyone about it. You know what I mean? I figured it out though. Google actually indexed my fake website. So when you Googled Acme webmail, my fake webmail ranked higher than their real webmail. So when subcontractors and employees were, Googling, oh, I forgot where my webmail was, I'll just Google, Acme webmail, mine came up first. So they would click on that, log into my fake webmail, which would redirect them to the real webmail, and they wouldn't think anything of it. So I didn't even have to, I was able to phish someone without even sending an email because Google they did a job for me. So that was pretty wild. And you're hacked. And at this point, your network's hosed, your boss hates you, your wife left you. I'll play a quick audio clip from a conference call I was on where someone got hacked. I'll jack up the volume on my headphones here. And this is pretty funny. He was freaking out here.
I need to know a plan. I mean, if I got to bring people in, I don't have the expertise decision. I don't know what to do. I've already got my wife in tears, my kid in tears because and I need a concrete answer.
Yeah, he was not having a good time. We'll just say that. So that's what you guys want to avoid, right? You don't want to have those kind of calls with breach response and incident response people or board members or company stakeholders. This is why we do this stuff, you know what I mean? So please, for the love of God, avoid that stuff. So where does the data go? This is the last part here real quick. One part is actually the data goes to the internet. So there's a website, there's actually a piece of ransomware out there called Maze. And if you get Maze, God bless you, because these guys are ruthless. What they do is they lock up your data. Let's say you get an email, you click on the file, it runs in the background, locks up all your data, and then you get a message that says, hey, to get your data back, pay us $2 million. The first $1 million unlocks your data. The second $1 million is incentive for us not to post your data on our website. So you can actually go to their website and there's just tons, there's companies, I can click on Andrew Cross & Co. and I'll have all their passwords, all their client files, literally everything about this company if they don't pay. And we've had about 3 clients now that got locked up by them, and all of them had their data posted on this website. So all their client files, bank accounts, socials, everything. So these guys don't play games. The second one is the dark web. So there's actually a nice website on there called SSNDOB, and about 80% of the United States social is on there. So I can actually go on here. I think it's $4 a social. If let's say I buy TED social and you want to buy a social, because I bought it, it actually is discounted at $1.99. So they're good businessmen, right? They know when stuff's used. So we hired a new CEO a while back, and his first day I bought a social on here and he was like, dude, that's crazy. Like, I think it's a voter database, what it is, and they got breached, and now a lot of people, if you're over the age of 40, I can guarantee you're on here. It's pretty wild. So at that point, you got hacked, right? So hopefully you guys learned something, how to not get hacked, how to avoid, being on the conference call and losing your mind over stuff. And I hopefully enjoyed the presentation. So thank you guys.
Okay, well, so James, fantastic job. Very interesting and humorous, darkly at some levels. Want to remind everybody, please use the Q&A tool to submit questions. And what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna hand the ball to Michael. And Michael, you should, did that work? Let's see.
I'm fairly certain it did.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Michael, you have the ball. So I just want to remind everybody, Michael's now going to share some insights into how NENS looks after their clients and helps them to take security to another level. And then we'll have time for formal Q&A for a couple of minutes. So please, if you have questions for James or Michael, please submit them in the Q&A log.
Thanks, Ted, for passing it over to me. I would also like to thank James for a great presentation. My name is Michael Korkolakis. I'm a principal at NENS. Today, I'd like to introduce you to NENS, and I'd also like to discuss how we help protect many businesses from the threats James talked about today. NENS has been in business for over 25 years. We support about 150 small businesses in the greater Boston area. Many of them are in highly regulated environments. NIST, DFAR, HIPAA, ITAR, and so forth. NENS has always been about having a strong culture and core values. And if you speak to our clients, it's evident by the interactions they have with all of our staff. We're also known to have high operational maturity. What that means is we know what it takes to operate a business. We know that you're focused on driving good value, focused on your customers, and you know the technology plays a critical role. We know that too. So what we want to do is we want to be able to match the technology that's going to help drive that business success. In order to do that, we have to be very selective about the partners, products that we use, and then in turn with the customers. If there isn't a great match, if customers really don't value technology and understand that it can be a differentiator if they focus on it in the right ways, then it's typically not a great match for us. But I have to imagine everybody that showed up here today knows how important this is, and I'm sure you'd be a good match. Cybersecurity, the NENS view. What makes the NENS approach to cybersecurity unique? A bit of a joke, but really the answer is absolutely nothing. There's really nothing unique about our approach. And the reason there's nothing unique about our approach is because good IT security is founded in best practices. And if you follow the best practices, then you'll have good security. So although these best practices will evolve, and they have evolved over a number of years, it's all about understanding which ones make sense for your business. So let's talk a little bit about what's changed in the last number of years. My job was really easy a number of years ago. All I had to do was make sure that we had good enterprise firewalls in place, strong antivirus, patch management, complex passwords, and encryption. And if we put that recipe in place, then our clients were good. There wasn't much to worry about as far as security was concerned. But then around 2013, 2014, we started to notice a couple of changes. And as I said, we had done the same thing for quite some time, and our clients stayed very secure. But now there were breaches that were happening, so we stopped, took a step back, and said, okay, well, what's happening out there? What did we miss? And what's happening in that marketplace? James spoke about many of those particular things. And I'm going to talk about how during this process of us taking a look back and trying to figure out what happened, how we came up with a whole new approach in security standards that we've implemented now for a bit over 5 years today. So here's the list of the 10 minimum standards that we have for our clients. The first one is next-gen endpoint protection. This is really critically important. Antiviruses that you might know to be household names like Norton, Symantec, Sophos, and so forth. A lot of those are still signature-based antivirus solutions. Sophos still has a signature-based solution, but also has some next-gen solutions today as well. But many of them are still using signature-based solutions. And why that's important to you is that during our due diligence process, we learned that signature-based solutions were 30 to 50% effective against these threats, where the next-gen artificial intelligence machine learning solutions were 99+% effective against these threats. The other thing that is really hitting home today is our workforce is remote. We are no longer able to protect them with the four walls and the firewall when they were in the office. They're working from their homes. They were, working, traveling. They might be, visiting with friends and family. So now our job is now to protect their perimeter, their individual perimeter. And we've been able to do that with a set of tools of layering on some security tools. So they're just as protected as they were when they were in your office behind the firewall. Patch management, secure email. Secure email is important. It's not just about scanning for viruses. It's about looking for links that are malicious that take you to bad places. It's about looking at things that look like phishing attacks so you don't fall prey to those. Also looking for things like impersonation protection where somebody pretends to be somebody that they're not. Next-gen firewalls, backup and DR. Backup DR is critical. I do want to take a moment here. It is your last line of defense. When all else fails, if there's a breach and you need to go back to something, backup and DR is the last place that you'll go to be able to restore all your data and get your business back up and operational. You want to make sure that data is not sitting right next to your corporate enterprise data. You need a way to get that somewhere else and secured so that if they breach your environment, that backup is not right there to be breached as well. Two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. I'm going to be talking about this some more towards the end of my presentation. Based on all of my years of doing this, this is probably the lowest effort, highest value item that you could take on. In fact, when you look at a report Microsoft put out, 99.9% of breaches in Office 365 would have been prevented if people had employed multi-factor authentication. Security awareness and education, you have to get your employees trained. You have to make sure that they understand, what a phishing attack looks like, make them aware of the nuances of certain emails. As we said, they are your weakest link in the environment, and the more we can educate them, the lower the risk goes for the business. These last two are linked. Written Information Security Program is something that is required if you do business in Massachusetts. It is Massachusetts law, CMR 201 CMR 17, and that is to protect personal information of your employees, and even it could extend beyond your employees as well. And what you need to do is you need to look at that on an annual basis. And so an annual security risk assessment is pretty critical. It's for us to take a look back, see what you've done and what's changed, and then make changes into the program to ensure that you keep you and your client secure. We do have some enhanced security standards. You typically find these in clients that are more highly regulated environments. IT usage policies that govern how IT is used in the environment, anywhere from data classification to acceptable use policies, how you utilize email policies, encryption policies, remote access policies. Again, it spans the entire scope of technology. The next two, vulnerability assessments and penetration testing. This is where you can either utilize tools or hire organizations similar to James to come in and do this type of testing. And so they're going to try to breach every aspect of your business, and then they can tell you exactly where you're weak. SIEM and outsource SOC. This is one of these things that is really, really starting to rise up in environments that are regulated. This is where we can take a look and aggregate logs across your individual workstations, the servers, your cloud-based applications, your network, and pulling all those logs together and understanding what any one or combination of those events look to be suspicious, and for us to take action on them. Advanced email and threat management. There are some additional things that we can do to protect email. And then single sign-on, and also known as zero trust. This is where we have a single application that has access to your critical business apps. So Office 365, Salesforce, Box.com, you name it, an input app here. If you're not logging in from that single source of truth, then you can't get access to those applications. So what that means is if somebody went directly to Office 365 or directly to Salesforce.com, they're not going to be able to, even if they had your password, they cannot get access to your data. I'd be happy to talk about any of our standards, the minimum standards as well as the enhanced standards. I'll give you my contact information at the end of this deck, and you can feel free to reach out to me and we can talk about them in more detail if you'd like. So now what? Biggest thing is taking all this stuff seriously. You're here today, so I'm assuming that you are. Next thing we want to do is start small. There are some really small effort things like two-factor authentication that have a really large impact. So we want to look for the low-hanging fruit. I had identified a couple of them in the previous slides that were in bold print. So you want to make sure you have two-factor authentication, some security awareness training, backup planning and DR, security risk assessment, annual security risk assessments. Those are some really low-hanging fruit to get you going. You want to be practical. So what that means is you want to implement things that you can actually implement and won't have an adverse effect to the business. There are two places you can be. You can be ignorant because you didn't know what you needed to do, or you can try to put something in place that really locks down the network and not follow it, and then you went from ignorance to negligence, and you really don't want to be the negligence part. So you really want to find the practical way of addressing IT security. And of course, at the very best thing to also do is partner with an expert. Allow somebody to guide you on what level you actually need as we're talking about security. How easy is MFA? Well, one thing I want to offer everybody here that registered is for NENS to do a MFA readiness audit and assessment. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at all the applications that you use and figure out which ones we can secure with MFA. And I want to show you how easy this is. This is a product we use, Duo. You can see they're putting in a username and password. Send a push notification to your phone, and all you have to do is accept it, and you're in. Big thumbs up. Not even 20 seconds. So again, one of those things you can do that will protect, per Microsoft, 99.9% of some of those breaches. A security risk assessment, which I mentioned is really needs to be done annually. This is a great starting point because what it's going to do is show you exactly where you stand. It's going to show you where your major risks are. It's going to show you in a very prioritized way, what the highest critical risks are all the way down. The output of this is useful, but we do have to customize it and tailor it to you because although something might be critical, as laid out in this report, it might not be critical to you in the business. So what we'll do is we'll take all of this data and then put it into a plan of action where we're going to show you where the gaps are in the environment, and then we'll work together to be able to rate and then prioritize the things that need to get done together. So we'd like to offer this to everybody as well. So that's the end of it. That said, here's my contact information. Here's how you can request some assessments, and I'll hand it back over to Ted.
Okay, thank you, Michael. We gotta go super fast. We want to be sensitive to people's time, but we've got a couple of really good questions in the log. Let's tackle David's first, and I think James, maybe you want to take a crack at this. David asks, there have been a number of breaches when SMS was used for 2FA, famously the CEO of Twitter. How concerned should small businesses be with this attack vector, and what's the state of the art method for 2FA to circumvent that problem?
No. So the one it's true. It's more insecure than the alternatives. The alternatives being like the push notification, like Mike was just going over, or an app code, right? So you can go in Duo, it'll generate a code for you, and you can plug that in. But I always say text is still better than nothing. The one thing I would avoid is email. Like a lot of them have, it'll go to the email. And the issue with that is if you breach the person's email, right? If there's not 2FA on their email, or you got their computer, or you have remote desktop access to their machine, and it goes right into their email, that's a bad day.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly jump on that as well, Microsoft released a report a little while ago that said 99.9% of the breaches on Office 365 would have been avoided if two-factor was in place. So although, yes, there might be ways to circumvent it, the amount of times that's happening is so small and such a targeted attack that putting 2FA in place will protect you against, if Microsoft's right, 99.9% of these breaches.
Okay, different question, kind of somewhat related though. Kevin wants to know about, is it still recommended to change your password every 3 or so months?
Yeah. So with the, and this is kind of the new guidance for NIST and a lot of other regulatory bodies, if you're going with the passphrase route, so like 12 to 16 character passwords, the guidance now is changing it biannually, so once every 6 months. If you're using the 8-character password, which I never recommend, that's the guidance for that through other regulatory bodies are like every 3 months or every quarter.
Right.
Right. I mean, I guess the main trend is that if you're using a very strong, complex passphrase, you don't need the extra baggage of forcing people to change the passphrase frequently.
Yeah,
Correct.
It's kind of a compromise, because if the issue is if you got users with 15-character passwords and they got to reset it every 3 months, they're going to be, that help desk is going to be hot, man. Those phones are going to be flying off the hooks, so you don't want that.
Right, and then Christian wants to know, do I need a SIM or SIEM solution when I can just look at the logs myself? And maybe Michael, you want to address your experience with logging and helping clients through that journey.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Going back, many years ago, there was, different tools that would try to, aggregate the logs for you. I can tell you, with working with hundreds of different IT departments, that was the last thing on somebody's list, is to go through logs. So the benefit of outsourcing this and then having somebody with the team is that that's what you pay this service to do, is that they're going to be looking at it for you. More times than not, after a breach has occurred, and I'll let James, jump in here, you go back and you can find stuff in the logs. The issue is nobody was actually looking at it.
Yeah, no, it's the automation factor, the ability to pool logs from a bunch of different technologies is, I mean, it's invaluable. You need that.
Right. So I think we're a couple minutes over our promise to keep this to an hour. So Michael, why don't you just conclude us with how people can get in touch, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. So you can reach out to me directly. My email's here, michaelk@nens.com. If you wanted to request an assessment for us to do the audit on multi-factor authentication or complete a security risk assessment, you can also just email sales@nens.com. Just make sure you include your name, email address, phone number, date of birth, social security number, and of course I'm kidding about the last two, but really just email us here for what it is that you're looking for, and we'll get right back to you within 24 hours.
Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Sorry we went just a couple minutes over, but we had some good questions that we wanted to address there. On behalf of the NENS team, I want to thank James Carroll for sharing all of the interesting stories and insights. And with that, this will conclude the NENS Security Awareness webinar. Thanks a lot for everyone for joining us. Take care.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.